Hello, my name is Joe, and very excited to share with you guys my childhood experience in Uganda. So, when my parents first moved to Banda, which is a suburb right at the edge of Kampala City, the capital of Uganda, they were the very first people who moved to this place. And I remember talking to my mother and father, and they said they bought this large piece of property at about 80 US dollars. And because they were the very first inhabitants of this place, my parents were able to get electricity and plumbing at the very kind of beginning of the development of this small little town. My childhood experience in Banda was very fascinating because it was a very congested place. It was not a desired place. In fact, I remember going to school. I went to school, and so every morning I had kind of a unique experience of moving from the suburb into the city, and I just traversing kind of different layers of people and navigating through maybe the more organized part of the city, downtown area, and traversing back to the edge of the city, which was kind of a very, very different experience for me. But regardless, as a child, that began to shape my understanding of what the suburb and what the city was. You know, when I went into the city, it was very congested. It was a very business area. The elementary school I went to was right in the middle of the business district downtown. And then every day I would make my way back home to the outside part of the city, kind of at the edge of the city. And Banda was historically a home of the king of Buganda. So the original name came from Banda Baloga, which means the witches of Banda. And that was a name that was kind of labeled on this part of town because of the misfortunes that the king of Buganda had in about 1862. And so it got its name, and the short version is Banda, and so that's what it's been known. Most importantly, most people know Banda as a slum, and so whenever I told people I lived in Banda, there was almost this interesting stigma about people not wanting to live in Banda because Banda was known for its drug abuse. It was known for high levels of theft. It was known for the worst housing conditions in town. And so me and my siblings at school were very hesitant to even mention to people that I lived in Banda, but that was our reality. So my experience in Banda was a very unique experience because I every day had an opportunity to play with my friends in the neighborhood, and soccer was one of my childhood games that we loved so much. And if you know anything about many African communities, soccer is kind of a bonding sport. And so every evening we gathered together and played soccer, kind of an open kind of patch of field right next to where my parents lived. And so that began to bring communities together because different children from different parts of the slum came together to play soccer. But over time, this place began to change. I saw my neighborhood began to change. So in 1956, the Ugandan government began to establish kind of education institute right at the slopes of Banda. And so three large academic institutions merged and formed Chambogo University. And I remember when that began, I wasn't born yet, but then that began to radically shift what Banda looked like. This place that was, again, very congested, non-desirable, now became desirable because now businessmen came into Banda to establish housing for students. And because of that, I saw the patches of land where me and my friends used to play in being bought by developers, where I saw our neighbors begin to move to different parts of the town to get cheaper rent. I saw residential homes being turned into housing units because there was a huge, huge demand. I saw large businesses began to grow in Banda. I saw small businesses begin to spring out, and radically the conditions of this small little town began to radically change as a result of large numbers of people beginning to come and live in this place. So a place that was absolutely not desirable was now a place where people from all over East Africa came to get an education. And today, even as I've had an opportunity to come and live here in the United States, every time I go home, my memories of my childhood experiences are changing, because the places that I used to see and play at have been covered up by large developments, housing complexes for students. Now, Banda is a very transient community, because when the semester is going on, it is very bright. There is so much activity going on. When the semester students are off, the place is almost dead, because everything kind of depends on the tempo of the students. I remember growing up, just moving from home and going to church or going to play with my friends, just being able to navigate through kind of a maze of houses. And from my experience, there was no difference between what was public and what was private. Because for me to move from my house to go to church, or from my house to go to another distant friend's home, it had to take me to go through literally people's front doors and back doors. But traveling through the streets of Banda, what you call a street, with no boundaries between what was private and what was public, with no clear distinction between the public realm and the private realm, was to me almost a social construct, because by traversing through kind of a maze of shacks of houses, you had almost a social interaction. And that's what made the community what it was. It was the thing that brought people together. It was a way for me to know where my neighbors were. It was a way for me to understand how people lived and how different neighbors interacted with their homes. And that was interesting, because at the end of the day, everyone knew each other, because the way the streets and the mazes worked, it just forced you to kind of run into people's intimate places. But what's interesting also, people were never frustrated that you're walking, quote in quotes, into what their private realm or what their intimate spaces are. And to me, that's such a beautiful thing, that when I think about how that informed my empathy for places where people live, how that has informed my empathy of design, even as I've moved on and now look back and see how that shaped my ability to look at communities and how communities function, how walkable it was, yet it didn't have sidewalks, how it was so much a walkable town where streets came together with the kind of individual land or people's personal homes, yet that's how the community functioned. So as much as there were no monuments, there were no designated streets or private and public spaces, I loved my experience in Kampala. And it's just a wonderful thing that taking this class has informed me of just different ways how I can think about my small city.